I'm Lori Murray, President of Committee for Economic Development of the Conference Board. The Distinguished Performance Awards is a decades-long tradition at the Committee for Economic Development. Each year, we honor a preeminent group of U.S. business executives who exemplify leadership in both their companies and their communities. It pays tribute to the legacy of CED's founders, America's leading CEOs who during World War II heeded the call to public service to guide the transition from a wartime to a prosperous peacetime economy that would provide high levels of employment, production, and consumption for all Americans and serve as the bedrock of our democracy. Highlighting the outstanding work of our Distinguished Performance Awardees offers the business community and the nation strong examples they can follow. History has shown that when business helps solve key economic and educational challenges, the benefits extend throughout society. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing one of CED's 2020 awardees, Gary Norcross. Gary is Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer of FIS, a $12 billion global business. FIS is a Fortune 500 company and holds leadership positions in payment processing, financial software, and banking solutions. Gary started his career more than 30 years ago as an entry-level programmer, becoming Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer in 2018. Under his leadership, FIS has grown to more than 55,000 employees worldwide, serving over 20,000 clients in more than 130 countries. FIS also ranks consistently among the industry's leading financial technology providers, including the top FinTech 106 times within the last 10 years. Gary also holds a variety of leadership and board of directors roles. He is a board member of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, serves on the Dean's Executive Advisory Board for the Sam M. Walton School of Business at the University of Arkansas, and as a board member of the YMCA of Florida's First Coast and the KIPP Impact School in Jacksonville, Florida. In 2018, he was named the Jacksonville Business Journal as one of their ultimate CEOs. Gary, thank you for joining us for the CED Conversation series of leadership in challenging times, and these are historically challenging times. No one could have predicted even several months ago where we are in the grasp of a global pandemic, a deep recession, and growing civil unrest. If there was ever time for leadership from the nation's business community, it's now. But we've been in these crises before, Gary: 9/11, civil unrest for social justice, global health crises, AIDS, SARS, MERS, the Great Recession. And so I'd like to start by asking you, what's different about the current situation and how do you see a way forward?
Well, first, Lori, thank you for allowing me to join you today, and thank you for the recognition of such a prestigious award. CED offers such a phenomenal benefit to all of the companies that participate in their program. So really want to thank you, and it's quite an honor. To get to your question, it is an interesting scenario. We absolutely are in unprecedented times. When I look at the differences to the examples you gave in the past, the way I like to think about it is, for the first time, we really have the entire globe in the exact same boat. We're all facing the exact same challenge. Many of the other challenges you mentioned were geographic, or it was a terrorist crisis in a single country. We're now experiencing all of this in the exact same way around the globe. We also saw that when the pandemic hit, we all watched it emerge out of China, and we then started watching it emerge into some of the Asian countries. But we all thought that it would be very similar to SARS or MERS, where the impact would be somewhat limited. And we all remember the day when the World Health Organization, WHO, declared it a global pandemic. We all know exactly where we were. We all started wondering exactly what we were going to do. And so it's been a very dramatic challenge for all of us in leadership of how to respond. You know, I'm very fortunate that FIS had made a lot of investments in technology, and it's paid huge dividends for us. But this one's been very different in how we've responded and how we've communicated to deal with it.
So what are some of the greatest challenges you've faced over the past several months? When did you first realize, you mentioned that the Global Health Organization declared a pandemic. When did you realize the magnitude of the pandemic's impact? How did you engage?
Yeah.
What are some of the important lessons you would share with other business leaders?
Well, one of the things that certainly hit home for us, and as I said, timing was very good for us. We had made a number of really strategic investments in taking our tools on an enterprise basis to the cloud. We were able to get that access to our more than 55,000 employees very, very rapidly. We operate in 110 countries. Our employees are housed in more than 40 countries. So our ability to respond was very important. And I think as leaders, the first thing that everybody looks for their colleagues look to the leaders is, how are they responding? Are they communicating, or are they closed? Are they embracing the challenge and actually driving change in the organization? So for us, what we focused on very quickly after the WHO declared it a global pandemic, we first focused on colleague safety. And to this day, I would tell you, every conversation I start out with any of our colleagues around the world is their personal safety and how we're going to address that through this pandemic. And so we quickly pushed as many of our colleagues to work from home as possible. We very quickly decided that was going to be the best alternative. We started, though, running into challenges where not all of our employees could work from home. Frankly, as being part of the financial services fabric of the world, our ability to maintain those systems in a highly resilient manner, to get the work out, to make sure that commerce continued around the globe, some of those positions require special access. They require special hardware environments. We couldn't move those people as quickly from home as some of our other employees, but quickly we pushed to about a 95% work from home. We then started focusing on the remaining 5%. Given the critical nature of financial services, and a lot of those services take places in countries like India, the Philippines, and the US, Brazil, we focused on how to get them into our offices, how to social distance them, how to make sure we could keep them as safe as possible, even though we were putting them in, frankly, in harm's way from a pandemic that we really at that point in time weren't sure, how big this crisis was going to be. So in doing that, we made sure that we paid double time to our employees as they come in. We wanted to recognize them from that standpoint. We took advantage of our facilities and spread people out as much as possible. But even then, we started running into challenges in certain countries because certain countries closed down so quickly that even though we were mission critical to the overall performance of financial services, how do you get through the police barricades that exist while they were trying to force everybody to shelter at home? So the teams really rallied. We started renting thousands of hotel rooms, putting our colleagues in hotels so they could walk to the office. But we quickly knew, even in that scenario, we need to figure out a way to get those critical services to home if at all possible. And so since that time, we've managed to move that 95% work from home, slowly move that up. Still not at 100% today because there are just certain equipment types that can't be moved to a physical home. Once we got everybody established of where they were going to work, I would say the other thing that we did as leaders is we really leaned in on communication. Proactive communication was very important for us. We were literally sending out daily engagement with our colleagues around the world of, here's what's going on, here's the challenges we're facing, here are the things we're doing to address those challenges, all while continuing to maintain that very important piece of their overall safety. We use this medium a lot. We were able to roll out video conferencing. We had already rolled it out, but we were able to embrace it very heavily around the company overnight. We do a lot of video recordings that we can then send out to our colleagues. I grew out my pandemic beard to show everybody that we were going through it. Obviously, I shaved it months ago. It was way too itchy for me. But we just did a lot of different things in order to show the human aspects of this, because everybody was going through the same emotion. People were concerned about how big was this pandemic going to be, the severity of it, the outcomes if I contracted the virus. And so focusing on those things, whether getting people the tools necessary to work from home effectively, or just focusing on proactive communications, were all early things we did from a leadership standpoint to help deal with this pandemic. And it's paid off. It's at FIS. I would tell you our employee engagement scores are the highest they've ever been. Really, we just recently went through all of our Glint surveys. Every category was up an average of 7 to 8 points, and we already had very strong engagement across FIS. Even in our customer engagement, our ability to deliver our implementations on a remote basis. I just couldn't be prouder of how our company has responded to this pandemic.
And one of the differences with this pandemic is that it is a crisis that has shifted the lifelines of the economy almost to public policy and government support. In the United States, we saw a significant portion of GDP shut down, and the infusion of trillions of dollars of capital from the U.S. government to keep the economy afloat. And so looking at your role of CEO outside of the company in terms of the public square, how do you view that role in this pandemic that is a health crisis and an economic crisis that is requiring a very large role by government in the economy and in the public health?
Well, I mean, it's an overused phrase, but I think when you think about leadership and when you think about a CEO running any company, the tone from the top really matters. I mean, you have to be seen, you have to be heard, whether it's in public policy that's being implemented, how that impacts, to your point, the city square and how you represented that. It's very important. You talked about what the government's done in the U.S. It's been unprecedented, the amount of money that they have flowed into the economy to keep that afloat. At FIS being so critical, we always like to say, at FIS, we drive the way the world pays, banks, and invests. So as all that money's flowing in, it was how was FIS going to respond to make sure that consumers receive that money in the most timely way. So once again, not only did I think we established a strong tone and an embracement of that, we immediately turned to how are we going to innovate to let our financial institutions drive as much of that funding into the hands of the people that needed it, whether it's the payroll protection program. We literally stood up, over 100 of our banks real time and how to drive real time lending, so that we then innovated to the point where someone could go on to the Triple P site and it would take an average of a person 45 minutes to book a single loan. We got to the point where through our innovation, we were allowing our banks employees to book 2 loans every minute. And it was just a matter of how to get those funds out. And that was all through our real-time innovation that we drove through our systems. So it does start with the tone at the top, but it also then you have to turn to what are the things you're doing to help enable those policies to make a difference. It's one thing to embrace them, but it's really how do you help drive in a company like FIS? How do you help drive that into the industry, and so that the people that need it get the most benefit from it?
And then if I could take you to the global pandemic's impact on the global economy. You are really the heartbeat of the global economy and what FIS does. And we are seeing the pandemic adversely affect economies around the world. How do you think, what is the impact from your perspective on the global economy going forward, and on our critical relationships, including with China and India?
Mhm.
And how do you think U.S. businesses should respond? What's the role of U.S. businesses in this crisis, this global crisis?
Well, you're right. I mean, Lori, we really have seen this pandemic impact various countries in very different ways. We saw the entire world shut down virtually overnight after the WHO declared a global pandemic. But since that time, we've even seen within individual countries, whether it's government response to funding that we just talked about, or even as countries have lifted shelter in place at a very different in a different time, a different speed. We're starting to see things recover here in the U.S. very effectively because, frankly, we lifted our shelter in place provisions a lot sooner. We've also seen, as we know, a lot higher growth in the virus across the U.S. Other areas of the world, whether it's the UK, Europe, or Asia, those areas, many of them have held their shelter in places for a much longer period of time. And so we haven't seen the economy return as quickly as, say, certain other areas. But what I would say in general, around the world, we are starting to see economic recovery around the globe at this point. No matter where people are in their shelter in place mandates, we're starting to see people get out and drive consumer behavior and start pushing the economy in very dramatic ways. And we see that in our payments channels and through our volumes each and every day. You know, your question regarding around China and U.S. relations, frankly, we have to deal with regulatory and trade issues all the time. We've dealt with them over the years in our company, and I can't think of a year where we've never had some issue going on between two countries trying to figure out the right trade relationship. And you know, right now, U.S. and China is in that situation. I do feel the two countries will eventually figure it out. That's what we all do. We continue to work through these things and focus on them. The good thing about FIS, we're somewhat immune to these kind of trade issues. We typically aren't impacted by them because we are focused on financial services, and most of our services occur within the country, and then only through some cross-border engagements of the money and movement. We really don't get impacted personally as a company much through these trade debates. But I do believe that, you know, the economy will recover. We all know that. It's a very resilient economic recovery is very resilient when you have these crises. So we'll continue to see it recover, albeit it will recover at different speeds around the world. And as part of this, trade negotiations will work themselves out over time based on the needs of the countries that are dealing with those kind of trade issues.
And so looking at the economy we're heading into, the one thing that almost every analyst is certain about is that we're not returning to the economy of January 2020. And you've mentioned some very important initiatives, changes, leadership elements at FIS, including focus on safety, communications, innovation, and technology. Of these changes that have taken place over the past couple of months with the tectonic events that we're facing, how many of these do you see as lasting? What do you see as the changes? Where do you think we're heading into, and what are the challenges and opportunities? Recognizing, of course, this is a little bit of I'm asking you to do a little bit of a crystal ball here.
Yeah, no, look, I agree. I think that many of these changes, video conferencing, I always laugh, has been accelerated by 10 years. You know, we've seen the, you know, the pandemic really accelerate this type of engagement in very dramatic ways. Will we go back and everybody turn off their video conferencing once we have a vaccine in place, and once schools are fully reopened and daycares in place and mass transit? Will all of this end and we all go back to traveling multiple days a week on airplanes? Probably not, right? But what we will do is we'll see it swing back to somewhere in the new normal. We'll have a lot more engagement via video conferencing. We'll still have some in-person interaction, whether it's large conferences, new meetings on potential new clients. And so it will settle somewhere in the new normal. When I look at the level of communications that we at FIS are now putting forth to really communicate across all our colleagues, I don't believe that will pull back. We've accelerated it dramatically. I would have told you a year ago this was something we're very good at, but now we have found a new level of communicating and how we communicate. Will that come back post-COVID? No, it won't, and it shouldn't. It's taught us the importance of engagement, or the continued importance of engagement. And so, but we will find a normalcy or a balance to all of these things. And that is the crystal ball that everybody's trying to predict. Will we continue to see disruption accelerate? I think we will. We process today 25% of all the payments around the globe today as far as digital payments. That's going to accelerate. We've seen the use of cash dramatically decline. Will cash go to zero post-COVID? Probably not. But I do think that we're going to see people using a lot less cash. There's going to be a major step function in the need for cash as far as the reduction around the globe coming out of the global pandemic. And that's where disruption is going to occur. When I look at FIS, and what we talk about as a leadership team all the time is, how are we innovating to take advantage of the disruption that's going to occur because of this pandemic? And it all has to start with a very centrist view of our customers. What are their use cases that they're challenged with? What are their business issues that they're trying to determine how they're going to grow coming out of this? And that's where the innovation is going to occur. Companies like ours figuring out answers to these complex problems. And so because of that innovation and because of the global pandemic, we will see a lot of disruption in the new normal.
Gary, it is truly our privilege this year to be honoring you for your leadership. These are really historic and unprecedented times, and it's leadership that you've demonstrated throughout your career, and particularly during this year, that is so important not only to the U.S. economy, but to the U.S. as a whole, and to the global reaction and ability to survive and thrive through this crisis. So it is truly our privilege to honor you. Thank you for joining us for this discussion on leadership in challenging times, and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Lori. I appreciate it. And once again, thank you for the recognition. I appreciate it.